Hi everyone, this is Katie from Just Another Girl in Her Books, and today I will be reading to you from The Man I Love by Suanne Laqueur. A Guarded Boy. Some seek the limelight, and some hold the light in place. Eric Fiskar didn't like being the center of attention, but he liked situations where he had to keep the attention centered. He was the son of a builder and a musician. He grew up around his father's workbench, watching how things were made, or around his mother's piano, listening to how things were composed. The smoky smell of cut wood and the dizzy odor of turpentine wreathed his childhood days, along with the strains of Bach and Mozart. He played with scrap wood on the sawdusty floor, pattering along to the ring of hammer on nail and the dissonant squeal of a power saw. Or he lay on the rug beneath the piano, listening to hammers striking strings, nattering to himself as his mother gave lessons to neighborhood kids. "Eric is happiest when he's underfoot," she always said. In the dark of a night when he was 8 years old, Eric awoke to the sound of wheels crunching over gravel in the driveway. From his bedroom window, he stared as his father's pickup truck backed out. It gleamed white in the moonlight, the blue letters crisp on the driver's side door. Fiskar Construction, arching over a fleet of blue fish. Fiskar was Swedish for fisherman. Eric watched the red taillights pull further and further down the street, then turn a corner and disappear. He never saw his father again. It was a cruel and unexplained desertion which left in its wake a little boy soothed by routine and structure, calmed when things went to according plan. He grew into a teenager with an insatiable need to know how things worked and why. He took everything apart and put it back together, usually successfully. Anything refusing to reassemble was jerry-rigged, and anything that wouldn't jerry-rig was recycled. Any guy with half a brain knew to have a plan B. Eric had a plan C and D, minimum. In youth sports, he was continually elected captain, for not only was he a natural athlete, but also a natural rallying point. He knew just enough about all his teammates' personalities to figure out how the team worked best. The team had its superstars, its weak links, and its filler, and the self-effacing guy who had his finger on the pulse of it all, the oil keeping the gears in motion, the unifying force making the many into one, that was Eric. He dialed into basketball in elementary school. An early growth spurt had him at a promising 5'11" by the start of junior high, but to his disappointment, later adolescence only granted him another 3/4 of an inch. He would never break the 6-foot ceiling so beloved to boys. Despite his height, he'd been a talented, scrappy point guard on the junior varsity team, possessing a lethal three-point shot and a reputation as an elegant thug on defense. He held the league record in steals until he was benched with an ankle injury his sophomore year. Christine Fiskar allowed her oldest son a 3-day pity party. It was all she could afford. She had sold the piano and now worked 2 jobs while pursuing a nursing degree. The bulk of her worry was allocated to her younger son, Peter, who was profoundly deaf after a childhood illness and stubbornly uncommunicative since his father had left. 3 days was also the limit of her patience. Even before the desertion, Christine had never coddled either of her sons, nor had public hand-wringing ever been in her nature. Her pain as an abandoned wife was suffered in private, far from the boy's eyes. As a single mother, she set the past aside and made plans. Shrewdness and self-sufficiency were the bedrock beneath her little family. Once Eric was in a walking cast and maneuvering easily on his crutches, she challenged him to find a new hobby. Something to fill up the hours between dismissal and 5:30. "Something accountable, mister," Christine said. "I need to know where you are, and no hanging around street corners, or I'll find you." A job. She ruffled his short blonde hair, teasing. Eric wasn't a troublemaker. He'd been making his own pocket money since he was 11, when he became familiar with such terms as willful desertion and child support, and the need to check the divorced box on forms. He knew his Fiskar grandparents contributed to his and Pete's upbringing. They lived far upstate near the Canadian border, a modest and self-sufficient couple full of Scandinavian reserve. They pledged support to their 2 grandsons, but it was a stoic assurance. Eric could never tell if they helped out of love, obligation, or shame. They expressed appreciation through deeds, not words. No loving sentiments or warm embraces had ever marked Eric's visits with the Fiskar elders. He got his fill of physical mush from Christine's family, a close-knit Italian clan, with no money to spare, but affection on tap. Eric was his mother's apt pupil. He earned his degree in shrewdness and adjusted quickly. He learned to stay out of trouble and always let Christine know where he was. He knew how hard she worked, knew the basics were covered, and knew Peter's needs took priority. If he wanted luxuries, either material or spiritual, he had to get them himself. With sports out of the equation, though, Eric had no idea what to do with his time. Out of loyalty, he presented himself at basketball practices and games, continuing to rally his mates and picking up some skills as an unspoken assistant coach. But his soul was lost, and his inner compass whirled in a desperate search for another true north he could align to. He had a creative streak, an inherent desire for expression, one not easily channeled into the obvious mediums. He already played piano and a little guitar, taking lessons at the local Y for the former and banging away by ear on the latter. But neither of those were for public consumption. He played for himself or in a small jamming group at most. His voice was legitimate, but he didn't like to sing in front of people, and he most definitely didn't dance. Truth was, he was a much better tinkerer than creator, although it all felt like the same thing to him. It was Mrs. Jerome, wisest in the school's cadre of wise teachers and faculty advisor to the drama club, who casually suggested Eric come by the auditorium where The Man Who Came to Dinner was in rehearsal. As showtime loomed, something always needed doing behind the scenes. Eric liked Mindy Meredith, one of the drama club starlets, and he liked the sound of behind the scenes. It seemed the defense of the performing arts team. Curious, he loped into the auditorium, took a good look around at the pandemonium, and immediately dialed into the current of purposeful action beneath it and the big picture around it. Things had to get done here. The show was on the stage, true, but a second show was going on backstage, in front of the stage, even over the stage, and without those shows, there was no show. He started low on the totem pole, manning a follow spotlight, keeping its powerful beam centered on Mindy. He caught the technical theater bug like a chronic flu. Wiring up the lanterns and organizing their light into cues was satisfying work. Building sets, immersed in the cacophony of hammering, sawing, drilling, reminded him of childhood days at the legs of his father's workbench, but not enough to hurt. Later musical theater productions appealed to both his eyes and ears. Everything about being a stagehand felt right to him. He returned to basketball his junior year, but his ankle would always trouble him, and from compensating, he developed a dodgy knee. He would play one game, then be out for two. Younger and fitter players soon eclipsed him, yet Eric didn't mourn the glory days too badly. By that time, Mrs. Jerome had entrusted him with the keys to the auditorium, and he had the run of the place. Until he graduated, he owned the same bit of square-inch real estate in every program of every school production. Eric Viscar, stage manager. The greatest tree houses of the world had nothing on the small concrete bunker built into the balcony. His command central, his crow's nest, his throne. From this perch, he ran the lights and called the shows. With his privileged keys, he let himself in during off hours. He hung there alone. He hung there with friends. He even got laid there once, with Mindy. And though it wasn't anything close to true love, or even false love, the encounter seemed to fix the coordinates for Eric's place in the universe. His relationships with girls weren't meaningless, yet they were always brief, and none left him deeply hurt or changed. Like most his age, he was rabidly curious about sex and sought it out in the juvenile way of boys who yearn to find what it means for them, rather than thinking of themselves as lovers intent on someone else's pleasure. He was usually taken on as the pet project of older girls who were feeling their own wings. Nice girls, all of them, but not one moved him to make plans. He wasn't sure why, whether out of shyness or idealized romanticism, he didn't get scrappy with love and rarely applied any of his mechanical curiosity to the inner workings of women. Some in the know would say that this was the inevitable result of his father's abandonment, impressing love's cruel nature upon the young Eric Viscar. Giving your heart only made you more vulnerable to pain. Anyone you loved could and would only hurt you in the end, likely without explanation. It was best you figured out an escape plan from the get-go and always eject first. Eric was indeed a guarded boy, struggling to grow into a guarded man. His father had scarred him. He pushed the experience into a far corner of his heart and made every attempt to forget about it. Still, he was young, with his moments of uncontrollable rage, inconsolable despair, and forsaken agony. Young but not jaded, he was neither cagey nor unapproachable, but what he gave forth was carefully chosen to give, and what he kept back was off limits. Girls were drawn to his good looks and his sunny nature. They grew quickly frustrated with him because he always seemed slightly aloof, holding back some essential key to the workings of his heart. Yet Eric Spiskar's heart was good, and it secretly yearned to be told so. He thought a lot about love, dissected and deconstructed it as a concept to the best of his abilities, and with these dismantled parts he tinkered, constructing dreams of a girl for him. Somewhere out there was a girl who would know him inside out, a girl who would never leave. Watching a performance of Guys and Dolls, he rather agreed with Sky Masterson. He would leave things to chance and chemistry, and when the girl came along, he would simply know. Until then, he would wait. If you enjoyed this reading of the first chapter of The Man I Love by Suanne Laqueur, you can one-click a copy for yourself at the link below. And if you are interested in seeing my review of the book, there is another link that will direct you to my blog page. And I hope you enjoy. Have a nice day.